Hello, my name is Aaron Dickinson from SHOWINGTIME, and I will be your presenter today. We are going to get started. Today's webinar is, of course, live, so if you have any questions as I'm going through anything that you see here, please feel free to type those questions in, and myself or someone else on our team will either respond to you during the session or we'll circle back with you afterwards if need be. And we are recording today's session, and you should get a copy of that recording via email about an hour after the webinar is complete. So today we're going to be looking at the InfoSparks interactive MarketStats tool, which just recently went live in your market. And then we're also going to be reviewing the fast stats reports that have been available here for a little while. And then we'll be looking at some usage examples, some caveats, and frequently asked questions. And again, I welcome any questions you may have as we're going through things here today. So let's get started here and get right into the demo. We're going to first look at the new tool that was released, InfoSparks, and to access that, we're going to go to the Phoenix Realtors website. So let's do that. So if we go to Phoenix Realtors website, underneath Member Tools, and then click on MarketStats, we have access here to the fast stats reports, and we're going to review those again in just a few minutes. But we're going to start off by looking at the InfoSparks tool. InfoSparks is available exclusively to Phoenix Realtors members, and you need to log into your association website to be able to access this tool because it is not publicly available. And so you would click the Access InfoSparks link there, and then there are some additional instructions here at the bottom on accessing InfoSparks. So once you go through and access the website, you're going to click into the tool you see here. So with InfoSparks, what we're doing is we're taking the MLS data and we're giving you the ability to visualize that on a region-wide basis, or go into specific locations and or filter by different segments of the housing market and see how the market is responding in those different areas. And so it gives you that big picture view, also gives you the ability to drill down, and you can interactively see things from a bunch of different angles. So when we first load up InfoSparks, we're going to be looking at your entire MLS region as the default. And at the bottom, there's a whole bunch of metrics that we can look at. But before we go through metrics and visualizations, I want to show you how you can make this a more specific chart system. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have our area selection tool. If I click on that, I can scroll through a list of available areas to report on. I can filter by the different area types from your MLS as you see, or I can just simply start typing in the box to find the location that I want to report. When I click on that location, you'll note that the chart below was updated. And so anytime we make any selection changes in InfoSparks, you're going to see those changes reflected in whatever you're charting pretty much instantly. So you're getting that feedback as to how your settings are affecting the data. So now I'm looking at just the median sales price for properties in the city of Phoenix, but I can further narrow this down based off of what type of properties are selling. I can filter based off of price range, property type, square footage, year built, bedrooms, and bathrooms. So for example, if I wanted to look at just single family and just 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, I can do so. You can choose more than one of these filter options at a time. So if you wanted to look at everything 1,500 to 2,500, you could add the second filter here. And now we're looking at both ranges together. But you probably, in cases like that, would want to compare and contrast them as opposed to merge them. So we do have the option here to click the custom button, and you can split them out separately here. We can also customize several of these. So we've got our price ranges, square footage ranges, and year built. If you click the custom button next to any of those, you can create your own ranges to run reporting on. So now I have those custom ranges, and I can come in and look at data at those levels as well. But wait, there's more. We also have the ability for you to compare and contrast different areas together. By clicking the Add an Area button here at the top, we have additional areas that we can add to this chart. So for example here, right now I've added 3 new tabs. Each tab that I added says entire MLS. Well, what I can do is just come into each one of these and choose the other location that I want to compare with. And so here's an example. Now you can do 4 areas like this. There's a couple of things to keep in mind. When we're looking at, for example, median sales price, this chart's pretty darn clean. It shows, Scottsdale's prices are significantly higher than everything else in this basket. But oftentimes the kind of data that you're looking at is going to end up being quite volatile. So I'm a big fan of less is more. And what I mean by that is that instead of trying to compare too much, comparing one area to another or one area to the region as a whole, I think provides a much more simplified understanding, and it's just easier to follow. So you can do a 4-area comparison, but I like usually just keeping it more simple. The second thing to keep in mind is that when you're working with additional areas, when you click that Add an Area button, that tab will become active. And it's going to start off with no filters applied. And whatever filters you see, whichever ones are applying to everything that's being charted at the bottom. So right now we're looking at all sales in Phoenix versus all sales in Scottsdale. If I wanted to, for example, look at just condos between those 2 areas, I can choose that filter here, or I can go back to my first tab and apply the filters that I had previously had there. So just keep in mind when working with multiple tabs, your filters will start off at 0 and you'll want to either reapply those or choose the original tab you had active. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is that you can end up getting too specific in your data set. And so, for example, let's just kind of there we go. So this looks weird, right? And your first thought might be, well, there's something wrong with the system. And actually what this is kind of showing you is that your sample size is pretty small. You've created something that very rarely exists in nature. There's not a lot of sales with all of these filter settings. And so that's how we end up with incomplete lines, with very volatile charting. And so anytime you see something like this, it's telling you you've probably gotten too specific and you probably want to back off your set of filters just a bit. InfoSparks is fantastic for drilling into details, but you don't want to get so detailed that you're down to a handful of properties. In a CMA, you want to be that specific because you're looking at 5 or 10 properties as comps and you're trying to adjust for those. With this, we want to see the underlying trends in the market. So we want to work with not 5 or 10, but like 100 or 200 or more kind of properties. So you want to be a little broader in your terms. And for example, just by changing that 2-bedroom filter and turning that off, I found that I ended up with much cleaner trends in the data. So this kind of complements what you would do with a CMA. It doesn't replace the CMA function. This is something you would add to that. Okay, so now that we've shown you how you can drill into specific geographies, narrow it down to different segments of the market, I want to walk through all the different metrics that are available at the bottom. And so we're starting off here with median sales price, which is the default. We also have average sales price. Now, I'm a big fan of using the median because with the median price, you're insulated from sales at the very high end or at the very low end, really skewing the numbers. And so just a quick refresher, the median sales price means that if we were to list all the homes that sold and sort them from highest to lowest price, the median is the house that sold right in the middle. So half sold for more money, half sold for less. And because of that, outliers on one side or the other don't really change that median very much. And so I think it's even though the number usually reports quite a bit lower than an average, I think it's more indicative of the typical home selling in your market. So we've got our median sales price. We have other metrics here as well that I'm going to come back to, your standard things like homes for sale and pending and closed sales. I want to show a couple of metrics that may be less familiar to you. The first one here is shows to pending. And so this uses the SHOWINGTIME showing data, and it follows any of the filters that you've applied at the top. And then it further will reduce the list of properties to just the properties that had SHOWINGTIME enabled on them. And we look at that and we go, okay, how many showings did it take for those properties to go from active to pending status? And so we can see from here, there's some seasonality to it. There's also, we can see some trends in the early parts of COVID versus where we are today. But where this can be beneficial is to help set some expectations with a seller up front as to what to expect when selling, and then to also use this as another benchmark during the listing period. If you find that, for example, here, if we look at days on market right now, days on market are about 45 in your market. And so if you're at 50, 60 days on market, you can go to the seller, Mr. Seller. We're beyond the period where more than half of homes have sold in the MLS. Now is a good time to consider making some adjustments so that we can get your home sold. And the same thing with the shows to pending. Now we have another data point. Mr. Seller, we've had 10 showings, no offers yet. And we've been on the market for a period of time, so this might be a good time to make a course correction. We're going into the slower time of year. It would make sense to be ahead of things as opposed to be chasing the market. So let's make that adjustment now so we can get those buyers through and get that offer. So it can help you with those course corrections there. The shows per listing stat is, again, using the SHOWINGTIME showing data, and this tells you how many showings are happening per listing per month. And this can be extremely beneficial when you're beyond that first few days or weeks on the market. We know showing activity declines pretty quickly as a property gets, market worn. And so say you're in month 2 on the market and you've had 1 showing. You've got so little feedback to give back to the seller as to what's going on because you only got that 1 showing. Maybe you didn't even get feedback from it. And so this is a way to help explain to the seller, Mr. Seller, we had 1 showing last month. The typical property like yours had 4. So there are other buyers out there. They're simply rejecting your home online and they're not scheduling a showing. So today, the first showing's really online. What they saw on there, they didn't have any interest. So we need to change how they are seeing the property online so that they have that interest to come to see the home. And so, in code, we're talking, staging, updates, or price, right? And so, but that gives you the opportunity to help explain to the seller, no news is not good news. No news is bad news in this case because other people are getting showings, you're not. So the market is telling you something by the fact that they're not coming to see your home. So other tools that for agents who have been very busy the last couple of years, working on those price reductions, working on course corrections in a listing haven't been a big issue because everything pretty much was cured by the buyer activity in the market. But today we need to go back to some of those strategies that help us get the market corrections we need to get properties sold. So let's look at some of the more traditional stats here now. So let's go here to pending sales. And let's look further into what we're seeing here. So by default, we look at a 3-year chart, which is actually the previous 3 calendar years plus this year. But we can adjust that. We can look at a 1-year view, which is last year plus this year. Or we can do my favorite, which is max. And max takes us all the way back to 2003 for your market, which is fabulous because you get a lot of context, a lot of history of what has happened in the Phoenix area. And so we can see those long-term trends here with the max view. We can see interesting things here like in 2010, the first-time homebuyers tax credit. All the buyers bought the first half of the year, and then it was very quiet the second half of the year in comparison. We can see all of the regular seasonality in the market. We can see some of the craziness here the last couple of years with COVID, how you can get a sense that sales activity picked up, and then in recent months now it's sharply declined, in large part due to the fact that mortgage rates have just skyrocketed, right? So we see all of that context and all of that history, and we can compare what's going on today to what's going on in the previous market cycle. You know, this is not 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 again. It's not the same issues, but there are some similarities in the fact that buyer activity is pulled back significantly and inventory is rising. So you can make some of those comparisons and try to understand, you know, how are we today versus where have we been in the past. We can also do another thing here when considering this big picture view. We can switch from a monthly view to a rolling period. And my preference is to go to the rolling 12-month view. In the rolling 12-month view, what we're effectively doing is we're annualizing the data along every point. And so we get to see here the big picture long-term trends in the market. And so here we can better quantify that COVID period and what happened here with buyer activity. You can see how it dropped there in the early part of COVID and then zoomed back up, and you were at on an annualized basis, you were at record levels of sales in your market area. And that went for some time, but then started to cool off here in the last 8 or 9 months, right? And so it gives you just a better sense of that big picture view. And so if we look at other charts here, let's look here at new listing activity. So we were looking at buyer demand. Now this is seller activity. And so on the new listing side of things, you can see those long-term trends as well. And you can see how if we go to that rolling 12-month view here too, we get that sense for, you know, seller activity was pretty consistent for a bunch of years. And even into the first part of COVID, it wasn't too much different. But then it started to, seller activity started to rise actually in your market in earlier this year quite significantly. And now that's even started to turn back the other direction. So yes, the reasons for this is something that I don't know because I don't practice in your market, but you would. So assumptions could be made, for example, like there was a bunch of investors that decided to pull out quickly, so that might have been the spike. But the beauty of this is that this helps you understand the big part of the picture of what's going on in the market, but the interpretations that you all as members have are going to be based off of what you see every day. So that local context is something that's very hard for anyone else to replace. And in today's market especially, what's going on in your region or even in your local area or even by different segments of the market is going to vary pretty substantially from what's going on with other regions and from the national figures. And so right now, the national tone is certainly very negative, and there are a lot of headwinds right now in your local market, but there are different things happening for different segments of the market and for different scenarios, right? How a homeowner who's looking to move up, what their considerations are different than an investor's, and they're different than a first-time buyer. So you can take all of this data and use that to help explain the market to a buyer or a seller, but then also use it to interpret what's their situation and what's the best way to help them. And so if we also look here at inventory, homes for sale, so this gives us a sense of where we are. Now, the one thing I haven't mentioned over here yet is the counts and the percentages. The count is whatever in the most recent month the number was. So in this case, we're looking at homes for sale in the entire MLS, around almost 23,000. The percentage next to it tells you that we're up 133.9% in inventory from the same period last year. And so if I wanted to and actually compare that, I can do that by just moving back here to October, and I could see what that number was there in the chart as well. And so inventory has zoomed higher, right? Because while sellers are backing off, buyer activity's backed off even faster. But inventory levels today are really just getting back to what they were in 2019. So as of today, you don't have an overabundance of inventory. You're just back to pre-COVID levels, right? Month supply, that's taking your buyer activity and your inventory into account. And month supply, that too is just a little bit higher than it was pre-COVID. It is starting to trend, further higher. So it wouldn't be surprising to see that continue if all the other trends continue as they are. But still, it's only at 3.1 months. That's that's not terrible at all. But in the context of what it's been the last couple of years, where you've been at like a half month to a month, it can feel like the sky is falling a little bit. And so the other thing we can do here is we can visualize this data in a bar chart. So in the bar chart format, we can look at up to 3 years worth of history, and we can see that trend over time as well. So here's inventory, here's new listings, here's price. And so we can, it gives us a different sense of the market. And what I like about this is it kind of simplifies the point. We're looking at the median sales price in October of this year versus October of last year and October 2020. So there's no clear interpretations that need to be made. It's made for you right there in the bar chart. So I like to come into InfoSparks and I just say, come in here and push buttons and you learn things, because you'll look at the market in different ways and suddenly you'll get some new insight that you hadn't expected. So let's go back and here we go. This is a fun chart, right? So median sales price over the last almost 20 years here. And so I want to use this chart. What do I have for my options in that? Well, the first thing I can do here is hit the print button. And this is going to give me a PDF or Adobe Acrobat file for the chart. At the top, it's got some agent branding, and I'll show you how you can edit that in a few minutes. We have our chart. At the bottom, it'll show you if you have any filters applied and any locations set. It's also telling us we're looking at this in a monthly view, that the report was run today, and that the data came from the MLS. So that's the print format. If I click the share button, I have a few other options. The first question I'm asked is, do I want a static chart or a live chart? A static chart takes a snapshot of the data as you see it here today. And if you come back in a week or in a month, it's going to show you exactly what we saw today. With the live chart, you're going to get an updated chart every time you load it. And we update InfoSparks every night through the end of the month prior. So we just moved into November, and so we're seeing sales data through October. If we share out a live chart in December, InfoSparks will start showing November sales data, and your live chart will as well. So in most cases, I think a live chart is better because you're always showing the most recent data. Let's click the share button here and take a look. We get a URL that we can copy and paste wherever we'd like. When we hit View New Window, we can see what we got. It looks similar to PDF. There are some differences. First of all, we have some interactivity now, so I can see the values on the line. I also have some share buttons up here that make it easy to share this out to Facebook, Twitter, and others. At the upper right, you can download a PDF version of this report. At the bottom, you can download a PNG of the chart. You can also download a CSV file, which would allow you to create your own chart styles and types. And then finally, you can just bookmark this URL in your browser. Because I chose that live chart option, this will update as InfoSparks updates. So if I bookmark pages that I like to regularly use for presentations or use for my own information, I can just go back to those bookmarks. I don't first have to log in to the association website and go back in and recreate that chart in InfoSparks. So it can save a lot of time. Clicking the share button again, I have the option to also embed this into my own website or blog. And I can do that as a picture or interactive chart, choose the size or create a custom size. And then you would grab the entire snippet of code you see at the bottom, and you would copy and paste that into your website's HTML. When you do that, you would get this. And at the top, you still have a little bit of agent branding still built into that chart. But what is more important is imagine the rest of your website's content around this chart. And so now you've got interactive stats that are updated automatically for you, and they're on your website with the rest of your content. So it's an easy way to keep your website looking fresh and have all of that information current without having to post it every month. You have questions on how to use InfoSparks? You've got the question mark button in the upper right-hand corner that can help you out. You can also click on the user manual and FAQ at the top. This will walk you through a short demo video. There's contact information if you have additional questions. And then you can also scroll through the rest of the manual here or navigate through things like the metrics, which will talk more about how the metrics are calculated, and the sharing section, which talks about the shared charts. It's important to note that charts will eventually expire if they're not periodically accessed, and so the shared chart expiration details are in the section I highlighted here. Also at the top is the profile section. This is where we can upload our agent profile, photo, or logo, and update the contact information that displays on those charts. Just make sure to hit the update profile button at the bottom. And then finally is the My Area section. This allows me to come in and create my own custom defined area and then run stats on it. So it's just a map. You can come in here and draw your location. And once you've got that polygon drawn, you can then grab any corners and make adjustments as you would need to. You can also use the draw a circle button to draw a circle around a point. You can have multiple shapes if you'd like. You can also delete shapes if you make a mistake. And once you're ready to go here, you can save it and name it. Oopsie. I already did that example. Let's try this one. So it will think for a second, and then it's going to tell us how big of an area we have and how many listings are in it. And so we can see here, we've got a big area and 20,000 plus listings, so there's no problem here, lots of data to report on. So I'm gonna hit the See Stats link here, and we're gonna go back in and look at this chart. So I've got this new area I just created, and now I can run stats for it just like I could any other area in the MLS, and I can make all those same reports, etc. If I want to in the future access this area, I can use the area dropdown and go to the My Area section and pull up any previously created areas to run those reports again. So again, how do we access this? From the Phoenix Realtors website, and I'll walk you through access again a little bit later. And so with InfoSparks, your latest member benefit, you have that ability to really drill into details, filtering by geography, filtering further by the types of property selling, looking at line charts and bar charts, looking at sales activity all the way back to 2003, looking at things in a monthly or rolling period view, looking at all those different metrics we saw at the bottom. We can customize the ranges of several, and we can make charts that are great for sharing. If there's questions about InfoSparks, please feel free to send those in. One question I do want to address is, what is this data? This data is coming from Armalus, and it's your region-wide MLS data, and it's the showing time showing data is only used to report on those two showing metrics. Everything else uses the entire MLS data set to report on. So you're seeing all of that MLS data activity. Okay, so now we're going to look at the FastStats reports. And to access FastStats, you're going to go back out to the association website and back under MarketStats under Member Tools. You're going to click on this FastStats button here at the top. And so the FastStats reports have been available in your market for some time, but I wanted to refresh you on the reports and everything about them. Now, this is using the same MLS data that we use for InfoSparks. We're just presenting the data in a different way. And so when I was a practicing agent, I'd like to use the FastStats reports for kind of like a big picture view of the region. And then I used a couple of InfoSparks charts to kind of drive home key points about my buyer or seller situation. And then if I'm pulling out the CMA at that point, that's when I would talk about price, because I've already set the scene for what's going on with the market as a whole with the charts that I get here from FastStats and InfoSparks. So we're going to look at 4 different reports. The first one is the local market updates. You can choose the report for that by using the drop-down like you can in InfoSparks, or I like to go in and just click in the map because it makes it easy to pull it up visually here. So you can click through, and the local market updates here, what I love about this is it's a 1-page report that has all the same kind of data you could have pulled out of InfoSparks, but it's all in one condensed page. So it's kind of like an executive summary report for the sales activity in that market area. So let's zoom in here and take a better look. We can see that this has been updated through September. We can see that we've split the market between single family and townhouses and condos. We see the same kinds of metrics we saw in InfoSparks. We see the most recent month sales activity versus the same month a year ago, percent change year over year, and then the year-to-date figures as well. And again, we have that split between single family and townhouse condo. And then at the bottom, we chart the local area you're looking at versus the entire MLS, again, between the 2 property types. And you can see those trends in pricing. And so the neat thing here with these fast stats local market updates is that whether you're looking at a city report or the county report or a zip code report, everything's formatted the same. The only thing that's changing is the area that's being reported on. So it makes it very easy to come in and pull a whole bunch of data for one area at once, or to compare and contrast different areas and look at all those metrics. So you can get all this in InfoSparks, but imagine all the clicking it would take to get all these same figures. So this, with just a couple of clicks, gives you all of that data in a 1-page view. Now, by default, you're always going to be looking at the most current report. However, you can use the drop down here to go back and look at previous reports. And this will continue to fill with older editions as we go forward. So if you come back in a year from now and you want to pull up something from 2022, it's available here in the drop down. The second report we're going to look at is the monthly indicators, and this is for your entire market area, as you see highlighted. And so here we're going to look at the 50,000-foot view of the market, basically. So the first page here, we have some text that's updated each month. The first and last paragraph kind of set the scene for what's going on in real estate and the economy in general. And the 2 interior paragraphs are stats about your local market. You're more than welcome to reuse any of this text in your own communications. Next, we have some quick facts that show you the year-over-year change and some key metrics. The next 2 pages break out the market into single family and townhouse condo and give you kind of like the Cliff Notes version of the rest of this report. And so if we look here, we've got all the same kinds of key metrics that we saw previously. We can see a several-year trend of those metrics. We can see the most recent month's activity versus the same month last year, the percent change year over year, and then the year-to-date view for those as well. And so if you only had time to review a couple things, or you only want to print out a couple things, this is nice because this 1 page here for single family, and then the second one for townhouse condo, you can very quickly get a sense of all the trends and all the metrics just from here. Now, if we go further, the rest of the report takes 1 metric per page and really breaks it down into more detail. So let's go to pending sales here, and let me zoom in a bit and walk you through it. We have our pending sales for September, split again between single family and townhouses and condos. The most recent month's pending sales versus the same month last year and 2020, both the count as well as the year-over-year change in sales. We see the same data for year to date. And then we have a data table here that shows you that trend over time, the last 12 months worth of activity. And I do like to look here to get a sense for what's going on with trends. And I find this an easy way to quantify it. When we can see that the trend year over year has been negative, but it's negative by small figures. But as you can see, as mortgage rates rose further and the market really started to respond to that, we see buyer activity in terms of pending sales continue to soften quite a bit. and it's gotten even more pronounced here in the most recent month's activity. So that trend is certainly negative, but keep in mind too, that was from an elevated place of activity in the last couple of years. And then for the bottom here, we again have that historical context of the long-term view going all the way back to 2003, and we can see those pending sales split out between single family and townhouses and condos. So each metric gets its own page. I think it's great to just come in here and just sit on each page and kind of read through it top to bottom like I did, and just get a sense for what is going on. These, all these metrics are interrelated. This is all supply and demand from your economics classes in high school and college. But some of these are leading indicators versus lagging indicators. And the real estate's kind of like this massive ship. So you see at the front of the ship is buyer activity, in terms of pending sales. That's kind of directing a little bit where the market and where the ship is turning. But it takes a while for that to really feed all the way through to things like price and percentage of list price received. This one is interesting because a lot of markets did like yours in that they went over 100% for quite some time. So more than half of homes were selling over asking. And then they've quickly retreated back to below that. So back to more normal times where sellers would usually negotiate just a bit on the price. And so, but looking at this data, the pricing and then percentage of list price received, this is all after something's closed. So that's what, 30 to 60 days past what that indicator that the pending sales gives you. So your pending sales and your new listings kind of will help guide you a little bit as to where the market's currently thinking. And you'll see that impact further down month or several months back in other things, inventory, overall pricing, et cetera. And then one thing I think it's important to focus on is discussion about housing affordability. So the housing affordability index chart you see here, I want to explain what it's based off of. It takes into account the prevailing mortgage rates at the time, the local regional household income in your market, and then the median sales price of homes in your market. And it takes those together to figure out how affordable your market is. A value of 100 means that the typical household has just enough money to buy the median priced home in your market. So it's just enough. So the higher the number, the more affordable, the lower the number, the less affordable. And I think a key thing to just keep in mind here right now is that affordability has certainly fallen in the last couple of years. We've seen that throughout all these different metrics. This is another measure of it. Affordability is down almost half from where it was a couple years ago. And if we look at the historical context, affordability today is down around the levels that it was more than a decade ago in the bubble burst. So that's why, while this isn't the same as what it was in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, this is still a market correction, and fundamentally it still comes down to, can buyers afford to buy? Do sellers have somewhere to go? So I think keeping that in context is important. Unless wages go up significantly, unless prices come down, or unless mortgage rates come down, your affordability is still going to be stuck in this lower end of the range. And so that will be a market headwind for a period of time. So housing affordability index is a nice way to take all those factors into account and get a sense for how are things doing. And then we've got a couple more metrics here as before. And then the final page is like page 2 and 3, but this takes the single family and townhouse condo data together. And so you get a unified view of those metrics with everything merged together. So the monthly indicators, it too has historical reports available. Housing supply overview, this is like your 50,000 foot view, but it's broken up one metric per page, but with different segment filters. So this is kind of like merging the monthly indicators with the with InfoSparks. So you can see what's the inventory at different price points, by construction status, et cetera. And then the weekly market activity report, this is similar in concept to the monthly, but now we're looking at data on a weekly basis. And so we've got some summary of the most recent week's activity, and this will run just over a week behind. So right now it's November 3rd, and as of today, we can see sales activity through October 22nd on a weekly basis. So this gives you more of kind of a real-time sense of what's going on. So here's our new listing activity by week, charted versus the same week a year ago. Gives you that quick sample of that allows you to compare period over period. We can also see a long-term trend of that weekly activity, and then we can go through a few other metrics and do the same here, like pending sales. And you could see that the trend is pretty consistent on pending sales activity and softening. So again, to summarize, the local market updates, that one-page executive summary view, zip code, city, and county level, gives you all your metrics and data on one page. Monthly indicators is that 50,000-foot view of the region, gives you a good sense of what's going on region-wide in the activity. Housing supply overview takes that and gives it to you in different market segments. So now you can see what's happening at different price points and the difference between new construction and existing. And then the weekly market activity report gives you more of a real-time view of what's going on in the market. So if you have any questions about anything we've gone through, please feel free to send those questions in. We're almost done with the presentation. I wanted to walk you through some usage examples. The embedded shared charts on your website make it easy for you to have your website updated with current housing data. You can use these reports to help bolster a listing. For example, go into InfoSparks and apply filters similar to the property you've got listed and show how pricing in that area is strong, how inventory is tight. Compare and contrast new construction versus existing or single family versus condos and townhouses. Compare and contrast different communities. Talk about how the affordability varies substantially just going a few miles. You can also create a ton of content for your social media channels, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, you name it, whatever you want. The key here is that you're able to give hyper-local market analysis of what's going on, give them the stats, give them some of your own recent experiences, and make sure to educate your sphere as to what's going on locally and help dispel national messaging, which may not match what's going on in your local area. And then two, it's a great excuse to stay top of mind with that sphere. If you're providing information, it's just a regular update. It's not like you have to constantly solicit them for business, but yet you're still making that touch and you're still top of mind. So when they do think of buying or selling, they know who to call. So as I said before, the data that comes from these reports comes from the MLS. Part of the reason you get notices to correct a listing is because it's important to have good data so we can have solid reporting. So we're relying on that MLS data for the reports we're providing. The only other data source we use is SHOWINGTIME showing data for those shows to pending and shows per listing metrics. The Fast Stats reports are updated once per month. They're kind of like the newspaper. It was the news as printed that day. Whereas InfoSparks is kind of like a website where it's constantly refreshed, and so you're always going to get the most current data and the most updated data from that InfoSparks report. Just make sure to know that if you're comparing the two, the numbers might be slightly different. And it's also important to know that the first few days of each month, InfoSparks might report slightly low for things like pending and closed sales, simply because we want to make sure that all the previous sales from the last month have been entered in and updated. So I usually suggest waiting till about the 4th or the 5th of the month before I focus too closely on pending and closed sales, because those might shift slightly higher in the first few days each month. The monthly view in InfoSparks is great to understand what's going on right now and to see all that seasonality and short-term volatility, but I am a firm believer in understanding context in the big picture. And so doing that with the longer time period and doing that with the rolling 12-month view gives you that big picture understanding, as well as the monthly view, which gives you the real-time view. So it's beneficial to see the market from different perspectives. Again, how to access these reports. Because this is so new, I want to make sure that you're well prepared to do that. So you go to the Phoenix Realtors website, click on the MarketStats link underneath Member Tools. To access the FastStats reports, you just click this button. To access InfoSparks, you click here, and then you'll be required to log into the association website. You might currently see an error message on the association website that is in the process of being resolved, so don't worry about that. That won't be there long. And then keep in mind that FastStats reports, are available wherever you are. You don't need to log in because they're right on the association site. But the InfoSparks tool is for Realtor members only, and it does require logging in to get to it. And if you're a big data nerd like me, you may run a chart and compare that directly to an MLS report and find they don't match. If they're off by 1 or 2, don't worry about it, no big deal. Every computer system looks at data slightly differently. If they're off significantly, 99.9% of the time, it's because you're not comparing apples to apples. So double check those filters. We also will do a tiny bit of data scrubbing. If a property says it's been for sale for 9,000 days, we'll assume it hasn't been for sale for 2 decades and exclude that days on market calculation from our report. We are solely looking at that at your local MLS data. We are not pulling in any public records information or other data sources other than that showing data from SHOWINGTIME. And if you have questions, feel free to contact the association for assistance. Otherwise, the user manual and FAQ has that demo video in there, has more help. And you can also reach out to us at SHOWINGTIME if you do have questions. And please feel free to share these reports out. This is great information to have, especially in market cycle changes where what's going on today isn't the same as what happened a few months ago, and it's not the same that's happening nationally. I think this kind of local data is indispensable right now. So please use it. Please feel free to share that with everyone in your sphere. We just ask that you keep the information at the bottom of the reports that says where the data came from. Just like in college, it's important to cite your sources. And that is our presentation for the day. We'll stick around for another minute or 2 in case there's any final questions. Otherwise, you'll get a copy of this recording in about an hour. Thanks a lot for coming and have a great day.